end this and take another 5 minutes. Good morning, everyone. I am calling to order our special meeting of the Minneapolis City Council. My name is Elizabeth Glidden, Council Vice President here, as Council President Johnson was unable to attend for this meeting. And our first item of business is to call the roll.
Councilmember Quincy,
Here.
Warsami,
Present.
Goodman,
Present.
Fry,
Here.
Palmisano,
Here.
Gordon,
Here.
Cano,
Here.
Reich, Bender,
Here.
Glidden,
Here.
Yang,
Here.
Andrew Johnson.
Here.
President Johnson is absent. There are 11 council members present.
All right, thank you. Next, we have adoption of the agenda.
I'd like to move adoption.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, moved and adopted. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That item is adopted, and we have one item of business on the agenda for the special council meeting, and this is the item that was just referred from our Transportation and Public Works Committee meeting held just a few moments ago. The item before us has two parts. It is regarding Southwest Light Rail Transit Corridor Memorandum of Understanding, and this would be to A, authorize proper city officials to enter into and execute a memorandum of understanding between the city and the Metropolitan Council on the preservation of Kenilworth Corridor in public ownership and control, and B, to authorize proper city officials to enter into and execute a memorandum of understanding between the city and Hennepin County Regional Railroad Authority regarding Southwest LRT. And I'll also note that we have been joined by Mayor Hodges for this meeting. And I am using speaker management, but I will make sure that I'm looking for council members. And I see someone has their, that's Councilmember Gordon with a question. But I think we might need a motion first to put this item before us to start discussion, since we are in a meeting of the City Council.
So moved.
All right, so this has been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, this item is now before us, and we can have discussion on this item which includes parts A and B. Councilmember Gordon.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I would have been happy to move that, but now I'm just getting oriented that we're following the council rules. Sorry about that. I just wanted to acknowledge the efforts that went into getting these agreements. I think it's really significant. This isn't something that was on my radar many, many months ago, but thanks in large part, I believe, to the mayor's office. But I also wanted to acknowledge the council vice president and Councilmember Reich for making this public ownership a part of the negotiations and part of the discussions, and then following through to get these agreements with both Hennepin County and Met Council is very significant. So I'll be supporting this and very appreciative of the work. I'm sure staff was involved in it as well.
Thank you. Councilmember Palmisano.
Thank you. Madam Chair, may I ask which policymakers from Met Council and Hennepin County participated in these negotiations for the memoranda of understanding?
Which policymakers? And I might call on Peter Reginius from the mayor's office to help in answering that question. Mr. Reginius?
Madam Chair, Sano, as it relates to the agreement with the Metropolitan Council that was negotiated as part of all the items that you see before you, and the policymakers who were present for that included primarily Met Council member Adam Dunnick, and a number of Met Council staff, including the regional administrator Pat Bourne. More recently, after the end of mediation, we've had a number of three-party meetings, including both the city representatives, Met Council representatives, and Hennepin County representatives all at the same time. Again, the Met Council members included Met Council member Adam Dunnick, Met Council Chair Susan Haig, the Regional Administrator Pat Bourne, and the Hennepin County representatives were Commissioner McLaughlin, Peter McLaughlin, and Commissioner Jan Callison. City representatives included myself, the mayor, council members Reich and Glidden, as well as other staff, including our city attorney's office and director of public works, and the council president also joined us. Council President Barb Johnson also joined us for the last meeting that we had on this subject.
Thank you. Yep.
Okay, and that is all. Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm wondering if Mr. Wagenius could get up and describe some of the details of this agreement. In particular, I'm interested in what the current status quo is with regard to the ownership of the corridor and what we would be getting out of this.
Okay, thank you for the question. Mr. Wagenius.
Madam Chair, Councilmember Goodman, it is important to note what the status quo is. There are sharp limits on the power of any local government to control what the private sector freight companies will do, even on land, even on tracks that are controlled, which by the public sector, which is not usual. Usually they own their own tracks, but even when the public sector owns the tracks, federal law preempts much of what we would like to do, much of what Hennepin County would like to do, much of what Met Council, any public agency would want to do. It is important to note that TC&W could sell to a bigger railroad and they could run more trains, and there's nothing we could do about it. TC&W itself could run more trains with a more dangerous mix of products, and there's nothing we can do about it. So one might ask, what is the value of public ownership? It's easiest to express as what would happen if we didn't have public ownership. If we didn't have public ownership, we would be increasing the chances that those two things would occur. If the public did not preserve ownership of land that they own, which is unusual under freight tracks, if we didn't preserve that, the public sector would be needlessly increasing the chances that that there would be a more dangerous product mix and that there would be more frequent trains. We would be doing that through two things. If we were to allow the land to come into private hands, we would be increasing the value as an acquisition target. TC&W would be more likely to be purchased by a bigger railroad. And more importantly, the trackage rights agreement negotiated by HICRA would go away. The trackage rights agreement was negotiated between a public entity and a private railroad. A private railroad is not going to maintain a trackage rights agreement with itself. That would only be maintained if public ownership is maintained. Councilmember Goodman, you also asked me earlier who will own the freight, and if I could just go ahead and answer that question now. These agreements with Met Council and Hennepin County do not answer the question of who will ultimately own the freight. They answer the question of who won't own the freight, a private sector railroad. But the ultimate owner could end up continuing to be Hennepin County. It could end up being the Metropolitan Council. It could end up being the Minnesota Department of Transportation. And Mayor Hodges met with MnDOT Commissioner Charlie Zelli to anticipate that eventuality. It is important to note, because I think there's been some confusion, including this morning, and communication that council members received about the nature of our agreement with Hennepin County. And I want to be clear to provide reassurances to the community. While public ownership is limited in what it can achieve, we got what we wanted vis-a-vis this agreement with Hennepin County. There were earlier versions which included contingencies that were unacceptable to the city, unacceptable to the mayor, to Councilmember Glidden and Councilmember Reich. Contingencies that made the agreement dependent on future actions of the Metropolitan Council. That was unacceptable to the city. As our friend and ally, Senator Dibble, said, we've seen that movie before and we know how it ends. We insisted on an agreement that didn't include any of those contingencies. The agreement we have with Hennepin County attaches to the land itself. To the land itself. It'll be recordable and put in the Hennepin County Recorder's Office. So 3 years from now, or 15 years from now, if a private sector entity wanted to buy the land, they would discover oh, wait, they can't, because the land carries with it this agreement. And that agreement, the terms of that will have to be honored by a subsequent owner if it's transferred to the Met Council or Hennepin County. There is one contingency that has been brought up as recently as yesterday and this morning that is in the agreement. It is contingent on Southwest LRT itself. But that's no different than the status quo. The status quo, prior to this agreement being insisted upon by the mayor, Councilmember Glidden, and Councilmember Reich, is that Hennepin County could sell the land tomorrow. The only reason we're having this conversation about public ownership is within the context of Southwest LRT. They bought the land for passenger rail, and it is only because we are having this conversation that we have the ability to secure an agreement that keeps the land in public ownership. If Southwest LRT didn't happen, we go back to the status quo.
Madam Chair, Mr. Wagenius, just one more question. There's been a suggestion that we should perhaps delay our vote and renegotiate for something better. I don't know how you get something better out of a party that didn't even want to do what we're getting, but nonetheless, wouldn't a delay or a renegotiation trigger the municipal consent being adopted without any of these conditions? In other words, we don't set the timeline for municipal consent, they do. So any delay to renegotiate the great instead of the good, which we probably can't get anyway, would ultimately mean that municipal consent would happen and none of the things we've negotiated would be included.
Mr. Wagenius.
Madam Chair, Councilmember Goodman, I take from that two questions. First of all, it's important to note that we have a duty to respond, as Susan Siegel has advised us. We have a duty to respond under the municipal consent statute. And if we were not to respond, the answer would be yes, with nothing attached in the form of these MOUs. That's point one. Point number two, I don't know what else we would ask for in a renegotiated agreement. We have an agreement that is attached to the land, not to particular policymakers who might be in office now. It is attached to the property itself. The implicit in the argument that was made to us was the idea that the land shouldn't be in Met Council's hands because Met Council has, I believe the wording was, the agency that forced co-location. That's all of the agencies except the city of Minneapolis. It's worth noting that of all the agencies who voted at the Corridor Management Committee, only the city of Minneapolis, both in its vote when Mayor Ryback was our representative and again earlier this year when Mayor Hodges was our representative, only the city of Minneapolis was willing to reroute the freight by sending it to the Surface Transportation Board. All of the other agencies, including Hennepin County and MnDOT, voted for co-location at grade. So the land is going to end up in the hands of one of the agencies that supported co-location because the Met Council representatives supported that, obviously. The Hennepin County representatives supported co-location at grade. The MnDOT representatives supported co-location at grade. So the request to find an agency that didn't support co-location at grade and have them own the land isn't possible because we would need to create a new agency.
All right, I'm just looking around. I want to make sure I've captured everyone who wants to comment. There may be just one further clarification that I wanted, and I guess since Mr. Wagenius has been responding, you maybe can again. Just to clarify what actions have happened by the Met Council to date and by Hennepin County to date on these agreements. Maybe this is more appropriate for our city attorney, Susan Siegel. Just so we know kind of the timeline and where we are at in the process to ensure that these agreements are executed.
Madam Chair, both of the governing boards, the Metropolitan Council has approved the memorandum of understanding on their part, and the Hennepin County Regional Rail Authority on the memorandum of understanding with that entity has also approved. We anticipate that the city will also be able to sign off on these agreements following final approval by the city council and publication, you know, those minor things.
Thank you very much. And I would just like to offer my personal thanks to the many city staff that have helped ensure that we have a good and strong and accurate agreement that reflects these commitments, especially our city attorney, Susan Siegel, Corey Conover from the city attorney's office, Director Kotke, and many other supportive staff. So thank you very much for that. Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm happy to give the mayor the last word. I'll just go right now, even though she was first in line. I think we have to vote for this today. I don't see any other way around it. This isn't a vote in favor of municipal consent. It's a vote in favor of agreement to give us a teeny tiny bit of leverage. It's certainly no guarantee in the end that there'll be public ownership that will prevent freight, but it's currently way better than the status quo. And I, for one, am not going to be one who holds out for the ideal instead of the good, because in this case, this is good. It's not great, it's not a guarantee, but it is a step in the right direction. I see absolutely no reason why everyone shouldn't vote for this today.
Thank you, Councilmember Goodman, and I apologize I didn't see our mayor. Would you like to have a last comment before we take a vote?
I would. Thank you, Madam Vice President. Something that was in the resolution the committee just placed before the entire council was a history of how we got here. And one of the things, one of the comments that has been made is that things weren't written down in the past. And one of the reasons that we find ourselves here is that things weren't written down in a binding way. We weren't responsible for that. We can't correct that. At the moment, we are doing our best to move forward in the most responsible way. But what we can do is make damn sure it doesn't happen again. And so I've had, and has been shared with everybody who's been working on this, an insistence from the beginning that every agreement we made is written down and signed off on by the relevant bodies. And that is no less true and no less urgent than in this particular case about this land ownership. The case has been made for why it's important, and I am making the case for why it's important that we write it down, why it's important that other bodies have already voted on it, and why it's important that we will be, and that you will be voting on it today.
All right, with that, I'm not seeing any further discussion, and so the clerk will call the roll.
Councilmember Quincy,
Aye.
Warsame,
Aye.
Goodman,
Aye.
Fry,
Aye.
Palmisano,
Aye.
Gordon,
Aye.
Kano,
Aye.
Reich,
Aye.
Bender,
Aye.
Yang,
Aye.
Andrew Johnson,
Aye.
Vice President Glidden.
Aye.
There are 12 ayes.
Thank you. Before we adjourn, I have a couple of announcements. First, our next city council meeting is this coming Friday on August 29th, 2014, where we will also consider our items that were forwarded by the Transportation and Public Works Committee, including the municipal consent piece. And then also to my colleagues, just so you know, we have another meeting following this. Communications has requested that we have approximately a 5-minute break between this meeting and our next meeting, which is Committee of the Whole. We will not have a long agenda for Committee of the Whole, so please be prompt in coming back. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.